We're here at GreenFin 24 with Natalia Dorfman. She's the CEO of Keita Earth Limited. Tell us about your company, Natalia.
Of course. Thank you for having me. Keita Earth Limited is a specialist insurance company. So we set up in December 2021 with the goal of using insurance as an enabler to help to de-risk transactions within the carbon markets. So we work for investors and buyers who are purchasing what they believe to be high-quality carbon credits in order to incentivize projects that can remove carbon dioxide from the air and also increase biodiversity and social benefits. And we protect them against the risk that those projects underperform. So the goal is really to increase the trust in that investment and provide a safeguard in the instance of a loss.
And you have recently launched a new product, right? Which we are referring to today as buffer coverage. Tell us about that. What does that do?
Yes, of course. So we have been working with corporates, investors, buyers of carbon credits. But for those people who listen to this podcast who know how the voluntary carbon markets work, you might know that the market is set up around carbon standards. So these are entities that create methodologies and structures for how projects can develop and issue carbon credits and how those carbon credits and projects are monitored over time. And one of the things that carbon standards have done is set up a pool of credits that cannot be sold, and they hold these in what they call a buffer. And the buffers are intended to be a safeguard for buyers of carbon credits, such that if the underlying projects fail, let's say there's a significant fire, the buyer and user of the carbon credit is still made whole because there has been this inbuilt protection mechanism of a buffer. Well, from the insurance industry perspective, we've always thought that buffers plus traditional insurance actually are very complementary. And so what the buffer insurance policy is Keita insuring this buffer of Wilder Carbon, which is a UK carbon standard, against the risk that potentially there is an outlier level of losses in any given year, meaning that that buffer depletes, which would cause a loss to the buyers and users of carbon credits. Our insurance is a wrap around the buffer to mitigate that risk of depletion and to ideally, therefore, increase the trust and definitely the resilience of these buffers, and hopefully build more trust that people can invest more money into the underlying projects.
And we're actually talking about contracts, right, that are traded on the carbon markets as part of this entire process. That's really where it sort of begins, if I can say that, if that's appropriate, where there is a market being made in carbon now, and that market is insurable, and you have the opportunity as a firm to step into that space and launch products and cover those kinds of risks.
Yes, exactly. I think there's a few different carbon markets. You have the voluntary market where companies make voluntary commitments to go above and beyond that which they can't yet decarbonize. And then you have the compliance carbon markets where there's a regulatory requirement for companies to engage and reduce their emissions over time, such as an emission trading system. And I'm very much of the view that both of these markets need to scale. They're an essential tool in which you can deploy finance to scale up the underlying projects, which whether they're afforestation or improved cook stoves or new technologies like direct air capture, they're removing carbon dioxide from the atmosphere or avoiding more carbon dioxide going into it. And the insurance is really built up to help mitigate some of those risks. So we would identify risks, for example, such as unavoidable risks like natural catastrophes or supply chain disruptions, counterparty risks such as the underlying project developer or counterparty being fraudulent or negligent, or maybe going insolvent over the time frame of the carbon project, country risks such as the country in which the project is based, maybe changing its regulatory framework or performing some form of expropriation, maybe if the government regime changes. And then, of course, there's still science and methodology risks that can occur as well. And so there's these range of risks, and we always say risk itself isn't bad. Risk exists in every single market in the world, but what the carbon markets have been lacking is more comprehensive frameworks in which to manage that risk. And that's one of the tools that hopefully we believe insurance can bring. Very well recognized risk mitigation tool that we're deploying here.
Okay, now you presented here at GreenFin 24. Tell us one question that you got after your presentation.
That's a good question. I suppose which is a very live issue in the market right now, I got a question around how political risk insurance works for carbon. And I think this is a very live issue right now because a lot of governments around the world are developing what they would call their nationally determined contributions in terms of how they're going to look at climate change within their own borders. And part of that is going to be carbon credits. And so many people are worried around what happens if I invest in a project in a country where then later that government changes its commitment to how carbon projects are treated. And Keita has another policy coming out on this, which is very obviously relevant for us, therefore, but it really is a live issue in the market that's holding back investment, and one where I really think the existing insurance industry can deploy our existing insurance policies to protect those project developers, investors against that type of political risk.
Great. Well, thank you very much for your time today, Natalia. We've been speaking at GreenFin 24 with Natalia Dorfman, who's the CEO of Keita Earth Limited.
Well, thank you very much for having me.